My name is Rudolph. I am 34 years old, and I never thought I would cancel my own sister Tracy's wedding. But when my phone buzzed at 11:20 p.m. with her text saying, "Don't bother showing up tomorrow, you're no longer welcome at my wedding," something inside me finally snapped. 8 months of planning, thousands of dollars spent, and countless hours invested at the venue I secretly owned. She had no idea that with one phone call, I could and would cancel everything. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that subscribe button and stick around to see how I finally stood up to my entitled sister. After years of disrespect, growing up with Tracy was a mixed experience. Being 4 years older, I naturally took on the protective, big brother role. I can still picture us racing bikes down the neighborhood streets in suburban Chicago, her pigtails flying behind her as she tried to keep up. Even back then, the dynamic in our family was clear. Our parents, especially our mother Margaret, always seemed to favor Tracy, whether it was more presents at Christmas or overlooking her tantrums while I got scolded for minor infractions. The message was consistent. Tracy was the golden child. Despite this imbalance, I adored my sister. When neighborhood kids teased her about her braces in middle school, I was the one who confronted them. When she needed help with science projects, I stayed up late helping her build volcanoes and solar system models. There was an unspoken understanding between us that transcended our parents' favoritism. As we grew older, I poured myself into education and work. Unlike Tracy, who had our parents fund her college education at Northwestern, I worked 2 jobs to put myself through a state university. Every morning at 5, I would head to the local coffee shop for a 4-hour shift before classes. Then wait tables at night. Those years taught me the value of hard work and financial independence. After graduation, while Tracy was traveling through Europe on our parents' dime, I was building my first real estate investment. It was a small, rundown duplex that I renovated on weekends while working full-time as a financial analyst. That first property led to another and another. By the time I was 30, I had built a modest but successful portfolio of investment properties. One of my most significant acquisitions happened 3 years ago. The historic Oak Ridge Estate, a stunning 1920s mansion set on 5 acres of manicured grounds, came up for sale when its elderly owner passed away. The property had been operating as a wedding venue for decades, but had fallen into mild disrepair. I saw the potential immediately and leveraged everything I had to purchase it. After a year of renovations, Oak Ridge Estate became one of the most sought-after wedding venues in our area, though I kept my ownership relatively quiet, operating it through a management company. When Tracy called me 18 months ago, screaming with excitement about her engagement to Brian, I was genuinely happy for her. Brian came from a wealthy family with old money connections, and while he always seemed a bit stiff to me, Tracy was clearly smitten. Our relationship had improved in our adult years, with geographical distance perhaps helping to reset some of our childhood dynamics. During one of our early conversations about wedding planning, Tracy mentioned she had always dreamed of getting married at Oak Ridge Estate. My heart skipped a beat when she said the name. "I know it is super expensive and probably booked years in advance," she had sighed over the phone, "but it is just so perfect." That night, I made a decision that I thought would finally bridge the gap between us. I would offer Oak Ridge as my wedding gift to Tracy, but keep my ownership secret until the big day. I imagined her face when I finally told her that her dream venue had been my gift all along. It would be the ultimate generous gesture, showing her that, despite everything, family came first for me. The next morning, I called Tracy with exciting news. "I might have a connection at Oak Ridge," I told her. "Let me see what I can do about getting you a tour and possibly a date." Her screams of excitement were worth it. A week later, I arranged for my venue manager Thomas to give us a tour, playing along as if I were just another client. Tracy fell in love with the grand ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and the perfectly manicured rose garden where ceremonies were typically held. I watched her eyes light up as she envisioned her perfect day. "Normally, we are booked 18 months out," Thomas explained, following the script we had prepared. "But we just had a cancellation for August 15th. It is yours if you want it." Tracy nearly knocked me over with her hug. "Rudolph, can you believe it? It is fate." The following months were filled with vendor meetings and planning sessions. I subtly helped negotiate better deals with caterers and photographers who worked regularly with my venue. Tracy was surprisingly inclusive, asking for my opinion on flowers and table settings. When she asked me to walk her down the aisle since our father had passed away 2 years prior, I felt a lump in my throat. Maybe this wedding would truly bring us closer. 6 months before the wedding, our entire family gathered for a celebration dinner. Tracy toasted me as the best brother anyone could ask for. And in that moment, surrounded by family with Tracy beaming at me, I felt truly valued for once. I could not wait to reveal my gift on her wedding day. Little did I know how drastically things would change. The shift in Tracy's behavior was so gradual that I almost did not notice it happening. At first, it was just small things. During a tasting session at the venue, I suggested including a particular appetizer that I knew was popular with guests. "Rudolph, no offense, but this is not some backyard barbecue," Tracy said with a dismissive laugh. "We are going for sophistication here." I brushed it off, thinking it was just pre-wedding stress. But as weeks passed, these small comments became more frequent and more biting. It seemed to coincide with Tracy spending more time with Brian's family, the Whitfields, who made no secret of their old money status and high society connections. The first time I met Brian's parents at a dinner at their sprawling lakeside mansion, Mrs. Whitfield looked me up and down before asking, "And what exactly do you do again?" Tracy mentioned something about apartments. "I work in real estate investments," I explained politely. "How quaint," she replied, before turning to engage someone else in conversation. Throughout the evening, I noticed how Tracy laughed too loudly at their jokes and adopted their mannerisms. She even contradicted a story about our childhood, making it sound like our upbringing was more privileged than it had been. It was as if she was trying to erase parts of herself to fit into their world. As Tracy became more entrenched in the Whitfields' social circle, her priorities for the wedding shifted. What was once a celebration of love became a production designed to impress Brian's family and their wealthy friends. The guest list swelled with people Tracy had never mentioned before, while some of our own family members were relegated to the B list. The bridal shower was the first major event where I felt the full sting of the change in our relationship. I had spent weeks finding a vintage jewelry box identical to one our grandmother had owned, which Tracy had always admired before it was lost in a move. When she opened it, she barely glanced at it before moving on to the next gift, an expensive handbag from one of Brian's cousins which received effusive thanks. Later, I overheard her telling a bridesmaid that my gift was sweet, but kind of outdated. The comment hurt more than I wanted to admit. With 5 months to go before the wedding, Tracy began making increasingly entitled demands about the venue. She wanted exclusive use of not just the main house and grounds for the day of the wedding, but for the entire week before. She complained about the standard chairs, insisting that they needed to be replaced with a more expensive option. Each time, I would privately speak with Thomas to accommodate her requests, absorbing the extra costs without her knowledge. "The client is particularly demanding," Thomas told me during one of our private meetings. "If she was not your sister—" "I know," I sighed. "Just keep making it work, please. I want her day to be perfect." A family dinner 3 months before the wedding marked another painful shift. Tracy spent the entire evening showing our mother and aunt's photos of her final dress, fitting and discussing the celebrity stylist she had hired. When our Aunt Julia kindly asked about my life, specifically if I was dating anyone, Tracy jumped in before I could answer. Rudolph's married to his work. Besides, who would want to plan a wedding after seeing the stress of mine? She laughed, but there was an edge to it. Not everyone gets to have what Brian and I have. I felt my mother's eyes on me, waiting for a reaction. Instead of causing a scene, I excused myself to get another drink. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter and took deep breaths. The pattern was so familiar, it was almost comforting. Tracy says something hurtful. I swallow my reaction. Our mother enables her behavior. It had been this way for as long as I could remember. When I tried to speak with Tracy privately about how I was feeling, she was always too busy. She had dress fittings, or meetings with the wedding planner, or dinners with Brian's family. My concerns were perpetually at the bottom of her priority list. "Can we talk about this after the wedding?" she would say. "I just have so much on my plate right now." Our mother was no help either. When I expressed concerns about Tracy's behavior, she was quick to defend her. "You know how important this wedding is to your sister," she told me. "The Whitefields are a very prominent family. Tracy is just trying to make a good impression by treating me like I am not good enough to be associated with her." My mother patted my hand condescendingly. "You are being too sensitive. Everything is not about you, Rudolph. This is Tracy's time to shine." I left that conversation feeling like I was 10 years old again, being told that my feelings did not matter as much as Tracy's. Despite everything, I kept telling myself that things would go back to normal after the wedding. I just needed to be patient and understanding. The venue would still be my gift to her, and surely that grand gesture would reset our relationship. I could not have been more wrong. The real downward spiral began 3 months before the wedding. I woke up one morning to discover I had been removed from the wedding planning group text. When I asked Tracy about it, she brushed it off as an accident but never added me back. More and more, I found myself learning about wedding details secondhand through our mother or cousins. Tracy's bridesmaids, most of whom were friends from her new social circle through Brian, began treating me with thinly veiled contempt at pre-wedding events. At the engagement party, I overheard 2 of them whispering. "That is the brother she told us about," one said. "The one who is not contributing anything to the wedding." The comment hit me like a physical blow. Not only was Tracy excluding me, but she was actively misrepresenting my involvement to others. Every time I visited the venue to check on preparations, I felt increasingly uncomfortable. It was bizarre to walk through my own property feeling like an intruder, watching staff who actually worked for me scurry around nervously when Tracy was present. The engagement party, held at the Whitefields Country Club, became the site of my most public humiliation yet. I arrived early to help set up, only to be told by the wedding planner that everything was under control and I was getting in the way. Relegated to the role of regular guest, I tried to mingle and stay positive. During dinner, Tracy clinked her glass to make an announcement. She thanked the Whitefields for hosting, her bridesmaids for their support, and even the wedding planner for her vision. There was not a single mention of me or my contributions. As if that was not painful enough, Brian's father made a toast right after. "When Brian first told us about Tracy, we had our concerns," he said, pausing for effect as the room grew uncomfortable. "But she has proven herself to be a perfect addition to our family. We are pleased to welcome her to the Whitefield legacy." The implication that Tracy had needed to prove herself worthy hung in the air, and I watched as my sister beamed at what I perceived as an insult. Later, When I tried to engage with some of Brian's friends, the conversation quickly turned to vacation properties and private club memberships. When I mentioned my real estate work, one of them raised an eyebrow. Investment properties? How interesting. I have a cousin who dabbles in that sort of thing too. It is a nice hobby, alongside a real career. I excused myself before I said something I would regret. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. When had I become someone my own sister was ashamed of? The final blow came when Tracy called me one evening to discuss the ceremony. I assumed it would be about our walk down the aisle, perhaps rehearsal details. Instead, she cleared her throat awkwardly. "So, I have been thinking about the ceremony, and I have made a decision," she began. "Brian's father has been so generous with everything. And the Whitefields have a tradition where the father of the groom walks the bride down the aisle in the absence of her own father. I think it would mean a lot to them if I honored that tradition." The unspoken truth hung between us. I was being replaced because I did not fit the image she wanted to project. "I thought you asked me to walk you down the aisle," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "That was before I knew about their tradition," she replied quickly. "You understand, right? It is important to respect their family customs." I swallowed hard. "Sure, Tracy? Whatever you want. It is your day. Thanks for understanding. You will still be in the family section, of course." Front row. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. The sister I knew would never have cared about impressing others at the expense of her family. The Tracy I had grown up with, for all her faults, had valued our bond. This new Tracy was someone I barely recognized. As the wedding date drew closer, Tracy's demands to the venue staff became increasingly unreasonable. She berated the gardener for planting the wrong shade of roses, reduced a server to tears over a minor table-setting issue, and demanded the chef completely revise the menu with just weeks to go. Each time, Thomas would call me in a panic, and each time I would smooth things over, always hiding my ownership to maintain the surprise. During one visit, the venue's head of security, Frank, pulled me aside. "Mr. Williams, I know she is your sister, but she threatened to have me fired yesterday when I explained our safety protocols cannot be changed. The staff is walking on eggshells whenever she visits." I apologized profusely and gave him a bonus on the spot. But the interaction left me feeling ill. These were good people who worked for me, and they were being mistreated by my sister, while I stood by and allowed it. Things came to a head when I overheard Tracy telling our cousin Jessica that I was jealous of her happiness, and that was why I had been so difficult throughout the wedding planning. The accusation was so backward, it left me speechless. All I had done was try to support her, absorb her verbal jabs, and accommodate her increasingly outlandish demands. Our Uncle Alan, our father's brother, who had been something of a father figure to me after Dad passed, noticed my reaction and pulled me aside. "I do not like what I am seeing, Rudolph," he said quietly. "Your sister has changed, and not for the better, and you are letting her walk all over you." "It is just until the wedding," I insisted. "Once it is over, things will go back to normal." Uncle Alan gave me a sad smile. "People show you who they really are. Under pressure, son. This wedding has not changed Tracy. It has revealed her." His words haunted me as I received the formal wedding invitation. Where once Tracy had verbally asked me to be her escort, the printed invitation simply listed me under family of the bride. It felt like the final erasure of my importance in her life. The week of the wedding arrived with a flurry of activity. The rehearsal dinner, hosted at an upscale restaurant downtown, would be the first time many out-of-town guests would meet. I dressed carefully in my best suit, determined to be supportive despite everything. Perhaps tonight would be a turning point. I arrived early to help with place cards, but the wedding planner once again shooed me away. I found my seat at a table far from the main bridal party table, wedged between distant cousins and Tracy's former college roommate, whom I barely knew. The slight was obvious and intentional. Halfway through dinner, Tracy stood up to make an announcement, her voice slightly slurred from champagne. "Before we continue, I want to make a slight change to tomorrow's program," she said, smiling widely. "Brian's brother Jack has agreed to walk me down the aisle. We have become so close these past months, and it just feels right." The room broke into applause while I froze, my fork suspended midway to my mouth. This was the first I had heard of this change. Not Brian's father, as she had told me before, but his brother. And to announce it publicly, without even the courtesy of telling me privately first. I felt every eye turn to me, measuring my reaction. With tremendous effort, I managed a tight smile and raised my glass in a mock toast. Inside, something crucial finally broke. After dinner, I overheard a conversation between two venue staff members who did not realize I was nearby. "I have never seen Mr. Williams allow anyone to treat his staff the way she does," one whispered. "Yesterday, she made Tina cry over the napkin folds." "I know. And she keeps threatening to write bad reviews if everything is not perfect." If she only knew. They walked away before finishing the thought. But their words crystallized something for me. I had created a beautiful venue where couples could celebrate their love. My staff prided themselves on making dreams come true. And here was my own sister, abusing them while I stood by, out of some misplaced sense of family loyalty. As guests moved to the bar for after-dinner drinks, Brian cornered me near the restrooms. "Tracy mentioned you have been difficult about the ceremony changes," he said, his tone condescending. "Look, I know family dynamics can be complicated, but this wedding represents an important merger of our families. The Whitefields have certain expectations, and, quite frankly, your financial situation makes you somewhat insignificant to the overall picture." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. "Excuse me? No offense intended," he continued, not sounding apologetic at all. "But Tracy is moving into our world now. Some adjustments in family relationships are to be expected. I am sure you understand." Before I could respond, he clapped me on the shoulder and rejoined the party, leaving me seething in the hallway. That night, lying awake in my apartment, I made one last attempt to reach my sister. I typed out a heartfelt text message. "Tracy, I know tomorrow is your big day, and despite everything, I want you to be happy. I love you, and I have only ever wanted to support you. If we could talk for just 5 minutes before the ceremony, I think we could clear the air. I have something important to tell you about the venue." I hesitated before sending it, wondering if mentioning the venue was too much of a hint. But perhaps it was time for her to know the truth. I hit send at 10:45 p.m. and waited. At 11:20 p.m., my phone buzzed with her reply. What I read made my blood run cold. "Don't bother showing up tomorrow. You're no longer welcome at my wedding. You have been nothing but difficult and jealous this entire time. Brian's family already thinks you are embarrassing with your second-rate career and pathetic apartment. I can't risk you making a scene or trying to make this about you. Mom agrees. It is better if you stay away. Do not come to the venue, or I will have security remove you." I read the message 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. Not only was I uninvited from my sister's wedding at the last minute, but she had consulted our mother about it, who had apparently agreed. And the threat to have security, my own employees, remove me from my own property was the final absurdity. I sank to the floor of my apartment, phone clutched in my hand, and for the first time since my father's funeral, I broke down completely. Years of being the supportive brother, the understanding son, the one who always stepped aside for Tracy's spotlight came crashing down on me. I sobbed until my throat was raw, curled on the hardwood floor with no one to witness my breakdown. As the tears subsided, memories flooded back. Tracy accidentally spilling punch on my graduation suit. Tracy throwing a tantrum when I received a scholarship she had also applied for. Tracy telling mutual friends I had anger issues when I finally confronted her about taking my car without permission. The pattern had been there all along, enabled and encouraged by our mother's favoritism. Around 3 a.m, lying exhausted on my couch, a strange clarity washed over me. I had spent my entire life seeking approval from people who were constitutionally incapable of giving it. No grand gesture would ever be enough. No sacrifice would ever be recognized. The venue, my ultimate gift, would be accepted without gratitude and forgotten by the next day. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a different path. What if, instead of absorbing yet another humiliation, I finally stood up for myself? What if I showed Tracy that her actions had consequences? As dawn broke, I made my decision. By 6 a.m., I was showered, dressed, and completely calm. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a steely resolve. I called Thomas, my venue manager, knowing he would be on site early for the wedding preparations. "Thomas, it is Rudolph. I need you to cancel today's event." There was a long pause. "Mr. Williams, is everything okay?" "The Whitefield Williams wedding is our largest event of the season. The staff has been here since 5 preparing." "I am aware," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded, "but I am exercising my right as owner to cancel. I will pay everyone for their full day, plus a 50% bonus for the inconvenience." "Sir, may I ask what happened?" I explained briefly about Tracy's text and her behavior over the past months. Thomas, who had witnessed much of it firsthand, sighed deeply. "I can't say I'm entirely surprised. She has been challenging. But legally speaking, we do have a contract with her. The contract is with my company, which I own. Check Clause 17 about owner's right to cancel. I am within my legal rights, though I will of course refund any deposits she personally made, just not the allowances I've been quietly adding." I could almost hear Thomas flipping through the paperwork. "You're right. Legally, we can do this. But are you sure? This is your sister's wedding day." "I'm sure," I replied, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Please inform the staff and begin the shutdown procedure. I want everyone gone and the gates locked by 8 a.m. Next, I called Frank, head of security, to ensure no one would enter the premises. He sounded surprised, but agreed to handle it professionally. "We will simply inform them the venue has been closed due to unforeseen circumstances. No drama, no confrontation." With the logistical details arranged, I faced my final task. What to say to Tracy? After several drafts, I kept it simple. Wedding venue has been canceled, entirely legal and justified. I hope someday you realize what you've done. I hit send and immediately turned off my phone. I had no interest in the barrage that would surely follow. Within 30 minutes, I had packed a bag and was driving toward my small cabin in the mountains, 3 hours away. I needed space from the nuclear explosion I had just detonated. On the drive, I called the one person who might understand, Uncle Alan. He answered groggily, "Rudolph? It is barely 7 in the morning. I canceled Tracy's wedding venue," I said without preamble. "She uninvited me last night via text. Said I was an embarrassment." There was a long pause before Uncle Alan let out a low whistle. "Well, I can't say I saw that coming. The venue is yours? I take it?" "Yes. I bought it 3 years ago. I was going to surprise her. Tell her it was my gift. But after everything, after the way she's treated me, the venue staff, everyone, I just couldn't do it anymore." "I understand," he said quietly. "Your father would have too, for what it is worth. He always worried about how Tracy treated you, even when you were kids. He just never knew how to fix it without causing more problems." His words were a balm to my raw emotions. "There's going to be fallout. Undoubtedly. Your mother will be livid. Tracy will be apocalyptic. The Whitefields will probably threaten lawsuits. Are you prepared for that?" I considered this as highway signs flashed past. Yes. For the first time, I think I am. I have documentation of everything, including Tracy's text uninviting me and threatening to have security remove me from my own property. I have records of all the extra accommodations and costs I have absorbed. I am on solid, legal ground. Legal ground is one thing, family is another. "I know," I admitted, "but maybe this needed to happen. Maybe we have all been pretending for too long." After hanging up with Uncle Alan, I pulled over at a rest stop and typed out a detailed email to several family members I was close to, explaining my side of the story. I didn't vilify Tracy, just laid out the facts plainly, including screenshots of her final text. I wanted them to understand this wasn't an impulsive act of revenge, but the final step after months of mistreatment. As I pulled back onto the highway, my cousin Jessica called. I hesitated but answered on the car's Bluetooth. "Is it true?" she asked immediately. "Did you really cancel the venue?" "Yes." "Holy shit, Rudolph." She sounded more impressed than angry. "Tracy is absolutely losing her mind. She showed up with the makeup artist and found the gates locked." I felt a twinge of guilt, but pushed it away. "She explicitly uninvited me last night. Called me an embarrassment, said Mom agreed I shouldn't come." "I knew about that," Jessica admitted. "I was with your mom when Tracy called her. For what it is worth, I told them both. They were being horrible. Tracy has been unbearable these last few months. The way she has treated you, it is not right." Her support, unexpected as it was, nearly made me pull over again as tears threatened. "Thanks, Jess. What happens now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I am heading to the cabin for a few days. I've turned off my phone. I just need some time. Take care of yourself, Rudolph. And for what it is worth, I think Uncle Richard would be proud of you for finally standing up for yourself." Her mention of my father, the second in one morning after years of rarely speaking of him, felt significant. Perhaps I had been honoring the wrong family legacy all along. 3 days at the cabin gave me the space I needed to process everything. Hiking mountain trails and sitting by the small lake, I felt the weight of years of suppressed resentment and hurt finally begin to lift. By the time I drove back to the city, I was ready to face whatever came next. The first thing I did upon returning to my apartment was plug in my phone. As it powered on, notifications flooded in. 57 missed calls, 112 text messages, 29 voicemails. Most were from Tracy and my mother. But there were also messages from Brian, his parents, various relatives, and even the wedding planner. I steeled myself and began listening to the voicemails, starting from the earliest. Tracy. 8:17 a.m. Day of wedding. What the hell do you mean the venue is canceled? Call me back. Right now. Tracy. 8:32 a.m. Answer your phone. This isn't funny, Rudolph. There are people at the gate saying, the venue is closed. Fix this. Tracy. 9:05 a.m. You vindictive shoal. How could you? Do you have any idea what you've done? Brian's entire family is here. Call me back, or I swear to God. The messages continued in this vein, growing increasingly desperate as the morning wore on. By afternoon, Tracy's rage had transformed into panicked pleading. Tracy. 1:45 p.m. Please, Rudolph. Please fix this. I will do anything. We can find another venue, but all the vendors are contracted through Oak Ridge. Everything is falling apart. Please call me back. My mother's messages were pure fury. Mom. 8:40 a.m. Your sister is hysterical. I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to fix this immediately. This is beyond childish. Rudolph. Mom. 9:30 a.m. I have never been so disappointed in you. To ruin your sister's wedding day out of petty jealousy is heartless. The Whitfields are talking about legal action. Call me back. Now. There were also messages from venue staff describing the scene as Tracy arrived to find the gates locked. Thomas. 8:20 a.m. Mr. Williams, Miss Tracy has arrived and is creating quite a scene at the gates. Security is maintaining the closure as instructed. She's demanding to speak with management. How would you like us to proceed? Frank. 9:15 a.m. Sir, just to update you, we've had to call local police for assistance as the groom's father was threatening our staff. The officers have explained that it's private property and we have the right to refuse entry. The situation is under control, but thought you should know. The final set of messages came from Brian, cold and threatening. Brian. 11:30 a.m. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but my family has already contacted our attorneys. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The Whitefields do not take public humiliation lightly. By evening, the tone of all messages had shifted. Tracy was in tears. My mother was demanding explanations rather than immediate action. And even Brian sounded less confident about his legal threats. Reading through text messages filled in more details. According to Jessica, after realizing the venue truly was canceled, Tracy had a complete meltdown in front of everyone. The wedding planner had frantically called every alternate venue in the area, but nothing comparable was available on short notice. Eventually, they had cobbled together a much smaller ceremony in the Whitfields' backyard, with only immediate family attending. Most guests had simply gone home. After hours of confusion, the expensive catering, flowers, and decor had all gone to waste. Jessica, you should have seen Brian's mother's face when they realized the wedding wasn't happening as planned. She kept saying, this would never happen to a Whitefield over and over. Honestly, it was kind of satisfying after the way they've looked down on our family. I took a deep breath and called Thomas for a full report. It was quite the scene, Mr. Williams, he confirmed. Miss Tracy arrived around 8 with her makeup artist and bridesmaids. When security explained the venue was closed, she actually tried to climb the gate. One of the bridesmaids had to physically restrain her. And the Whitefields? Mr. Whitfield Sr. threatened legal action, as you might expect. He seemed to think intimidating our security staff would change things. When that didn't work, he called the police, who simply confirmed we were within our rights as a private property. Any property damage? None, thankfully. though not for lack of trying. Miss Tracy threw her phone at the gate hard enough to shatter it. I thanked him and promised bonuses for everyone involved in handling the situation. After hanging up, I sat quietly for a long while, processing everything. I had expected to feel guilty or conflicted, but instead, I felt oddly peaceful. For the first time in my life, I had refused to be Tracy's doormat, and while the fallout was messy, it was also strangely liberating. 3 days after my return, my mother showed up unannounced at my apartment. She looked like she had aged years in a week, her normally perfect appearance disheveled. "How could you?" were her first words as I opened the door. I stepped aside to let her in. I think the better question is, how could you agree with Tracy that I shouldn't come to the wedding? Because I was an embarrassment. Her eyes widened slightly. "She told you I said that? She texted me that you agreed it was better if I stayed away. Would you like to see the message?" I pulled up Tracy's text and handed her my phone. Her face paled as she read it. "I never said that," she whispered. "Tracy called me upset, saying you two had argued about the ceremony. She asked if she needed to worry about you causing a scene. I told her you would never do that, but that if she was truly worried, perhaps having a family member keep an eye on you would help. That's a far cry from agreeing I shouldn't be there at all." She handed back the phone, avoiding my eyes. "I would never have agreed to that. You're my son, and yet you immediately assumed I canceled the venue out of petty jealousy without even asking for my side." She had the grace to look ashamed. I reacted poorly. But Rudolph, canceling her entire wedding venue? How did you even manage that? It was time for the truth. I own Oak Ridge Estate. I bought it 3 years ago. The venue Tracy has been planning her dream wedding at for 8 months is mine. My mother sank onto my couch, visibly shocked. "You own." "But how? Why didn't you tell anyone?" "I was going to surprise Tracy on her wedding day. Tell her it was my gift to her. I've been absorbing all the extra costs, accommodating every demand, letting her treat my staff poorly. All because I thought this grand gesture would finally make her value me as a brother." "Oh, Rudolph." My mother's voice trailed off. "But then she uninvited me, threatened to have security, my own employees, remove me from my own property. Where exactly was the line supposed to be? Mom, how many more times was I supposed to let her hurt me?" Before she could answer, there was another knock at my door. I opened it to find Tracy and Brian standing there. Tracy's eyes were swollen from crying, her normally perfect appearance completely undone. Brian looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "You," Tracy hissed when she saw me. "How dare you show your face in this city after what you did? This is my home, Tracy. And considering you're the one standing at my door, I think you're the one who dared show up." She pushed past me into the apartment, stopping short when she saw our mother. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Apparently getting the full story, which is more than I did before I left all those angry voicemails, our mother replied, her tone uncharacteristically sharp. Tracy turned back to me. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know how humiliated I was? How humiliated Brian's family was? About as humiliated as I felt when you uninvited me via text the night before, calling me an embarrassment and threatening to have me removed by security. That doesn't justify destroying my wedding." "Actually," I said calmly, walking to my desk and removing a folder, "I think you'll find I was perfectly justified, legally speaking." I handed her the property deed to Oak Ridge Estate, along with the business ownership papers. She glanced at them uncomprehendingly at first, then her eyes widened in shock. This says you own Oak Ridge." "Yes. For 3 years now." "The venue you've been planning your dream wedding at for 8 months? It's mine. Every special accommodation, Every last-minute change, every extra expense, I've been quietly covering all of it as my gift to you. Brian, who had been silent until now, stepped forward and took the papers from Tracy's limp hands. His financial background allowed him to quickly grasp what he was seeing. "You own the premier wedding venue in the area?" he asked, his voice hollow. "But you never said anything. All those meetings with the venue manager. I was going to surprise Tracy on the wedding day," I explained. "Tell her it was my wedding gift to her." Tracy had gone very pale. "So when you canceled the venue, I was exercising my right as the owner to decide who uses my property. And after your text, I decided someone who thinks I'm an embarrassment, who explicitly uninvites me from her wedding, doesn't get to enjoy my property or the services of my staff, who, by the way, you've been treating horribly for months." Tracy sank into a chair, the full impact of what had happened finally hitting her. Brian continued studying the documents, his expression shifting from shock to calculation. "If this information got out," he said slowly, "it would change the entire narrative. Instead of a wedding disaster, it would be a story about a sister who treated her brother so poorly, he was forced to withdraw his extraordinarily generous gift." I suggested. "Yes, I imagine the Whitefields wouldn't want that story circulating through their social circles." Brian's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. The implicit message was clear. If his family pursued legal action or continued to spread stories about the canceled wedding, I had a powerful counter-narrative. "We'll be going now," he said, taking Tracy's arm. She seemed too stunned to resist, allowing him to guide her toward the door. "Tracy," I called as they reached the threshold. "For what it's worth, I never wanted it to end this way. All I've ever wanted was to be treated with basic respect." She didn't respond, but I saw her shoulders hunch as they left. "Thank you," I managed. "I had no idea," she finally said. "About the venue, about how Tracy was treating you, about any of it." "You never asked," I replied simply. "You've always taken her side, assumed the best of her and the worst of me." She flinched at the truth in my words. "I've failed you as a mother, haven't I?" It was a question I'd never expected to hear from her, and it opened a door I thought permanently closed. Not completely, but we have a lot to work on. For the first time in years, maybe ever, she listened as I spoke about our family dynamics, the favoritism, the patterns that had hurt me since childhood. As painful as the wedding debacle had been, perhaps it had created an opportunity for long overdue honesty. The weeks following what my cousins jokingly dubbed the wedding apocalypse were surprisingly quiet. Tracy and Brian left for a healing trip to Europe, likely to escape the gossip and questions. My mother and I established a fragile new relationship built on more honest communication, and I found myself experiencing an unfamiliar emotion, peace. The venue staff, rather than being upset about the canceled wedding, seemed almost relieved. During a staff appreciation dinner I hosted, several of them shared stories about Tracy's behavior that I hadn't known about. Uncle Frank, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. "Margaret, perhaps we should stay and try to work through this as a family." She threatened to write career-ending reviews about me when I told her we couldn't remove the ancient oak tree because she thought it would block her photos, added the grounds manager. Hearing these stories confirmed I had made the right decision, not just for myself, but for people who depended on me for their livelihood. 3 weeks after the non-wedding, Uncle Alan invited both my mother and me to dinner. He had taken it upon himself to serve as a family mediator. Tracy sent me an email, he told us over dessert. She's still furious, but there were hints of reflection. She asked questions about the venue, about how long you'd owned it. That's more than she's communicated to me, I replied. I hadn't heard a word directly from my sister since she'd left my apartment. Give her time, Uncle Alan advised. This is the first time in her life she's had to face real consequences for how she treats people, especially you. That's not an easy lesson at 29. My mother, who had been mostly quiet during dinner, finally spoke up. I've been doing a lot of thinking about our family, about the way Richard and I parented you both. We did favor Tracy, and that wasn't fair to you, Rudolph. I think we saw her as needing more protection, more support, but in trying to build her up, we allowed her to tear you down. It was the most honest acknowledgement of our family dynamic I'd ever heard from her. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot. In the following weeks, I began therapy to address the lingering effects of growing up in that environment. Dr. Patel helped me recognize patterns I had carried into adulthood, including a tendency to seek approval from people who were constitutionally incapable of giving it, and a habit of diminishing my own achievements. You purchased and renovated a successful business, yet you kept it secret instead of taking pride in it, she observed during one session. That says a lot about how you've been conditioned to hide your light. 6 weeks after the wedding day that wasn't, I received an email from Tracy. It was brief and careful. I think we should talk. In person. No Brian, no Mom. Just us. We met at a neutral coffee shop downtown. Tracy looked different somehow. Less polished but more genuine. The European sun had given her a light tan, but there was something else too, a missing hardness around her eyes. She spoke first. I've been trying to write this speech for weeks, but nothing seems adequate. What I did was wrong. Not just the text uninviting you, but all of it. The way I've treated you during the wedding planning. The things I said about you to others. The way I took advantage of your generosity without even knowing the full extent of it. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. When I found out you owned Oak Ridge, my first reaction was more anger. How dare you keep that from me? How dare you have that power over my wedding? It took weeks of reflection to realize what that revealed about me. About who I've become. And who is that? I asked quietly. She looked down at her coffee. Someone I'm not proud of. Someone who was so desperate to fit into Brian's world that I was willing to sacrifice the person who has always been there for me. Someone who became the worst version of herself under pressure instead of the best. It was the most self-aware I'd ever heard Tracy sound. I appreciate you saying that. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she continued. I don't deserve it yet. But I am asking for a chance to try to rebuild something. Not what we had before, because I see now that wasn't healthy either, but something new, based on mutual respect. I considered her words carefully. I'd be open to that. But Tracy, there need to be boundaries. Real ones. With consequences. If they're crossed. I understand. I'm seeing someone too. A therapist. She's helping me recognize some patterns that aren't serving me well, including how I treat you. We talked for nearly 3 hours that afternoon, more honestly than we ever had before. There were difficult moments, tears on both sides, and no magical resolution. But it was a start. Over the following months, I developed a new relationship with my mother as well. We established a weekly lunch date where we were practicing more authentic communication. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was always real. I keep expecting you to revert back to the peacekeeper role, she admitted during one of these lunches. To smooth things over and let things go back to how they were. I'm proud of you for not doing that. Even though it's harder for me. As for the Whitefields, they distanced themselves from the entire situation as much as possible. Brian's family quietly spread a story about a venue emergency rather than admit the truth. Brian himself seemed cowed by the revelation of my business success, treating me with a new, awkward respect on the few occasions we interacted. Tracy and Brian's marriage was facing its own struggles under the weight of the wedding disaster and its aftermath. Without the distraction of wedding planning, they were discovering fundamental incompatibilities in their values and goals. I stayed out of it, establishing a boundary that their relationship was their business. One of the most profound changes was my decision regarding Oak Ridge Estate. After much consideration, I decided to sell the venue to a respected hospitality group. It had served its purpose in my life, both as a successful investment and as the catalyst for necessary family change. The substantial profit went partly into new investments, partly into a foundation supporting first-generation college students, and partly into a cabin by the lake where I had found clarity during the wedding crisis. Looking back now, a year after what should have been Tracy's wedding day, I can see how necessary that rupture was. Sometimes relationships can only heal after they break completely, allowing a reset of unhealthy patterns that have calcified over decades. I've learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's essential. That family loyalty doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. That boundaries aren't just walls to keep others out, but frameworks that allow healthier relationships to flourish within them. Most importantly, I've learned that self-respect is not negotiable. The moment I decided I deserved better treatment was the moment my life began to change for the better. If you're in a situation where family members or others consistently disrespect you, ask yourself what you're really gaining by accepting it. What would happen if you finally said enough and meant it? It might not be easy. It certainly wasn't for me. But on the other side of that difficult choice might be the freedom and respect you've always deserved. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your self-respect, especially with family, share your experience in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for themselves. Remember, true family supports and respects you. They don't tear you down to build themselves up.